It's hilarious. It's so funny and it's kind of sad at the same time. And I want to get into it like in the weeds with it. But before I do, I just want to give people a background of what we're talking about. So for people that might not know, Joe Rogan is one of the biggest podcaster in the world. He's got an immensely popular show. Now
second only to Sham Sharma, of course.
Second only to me, of course. Everybody knows that in the live chat. But he's been exclusively on Spotify for a while now. And even when he was not on Spotify, there was this controversy that, he gets these controversial characters and he talks to them about this and that, and he's spreading misinformation. And now, ever since he moved to Spotify, apparently some Spotify employees have been complaining. They've been asking for him to get kicked off the platform. And very recently now you have Neil Young, who was telling Spotify that, it's either me or it's Joe Rogan. Please choose. And, no points for guessing who Spotify went with.
Yeah, basically Spotify told him, nikal, pehli fursat mein nikal.
Yeah, they very politely asked him to get lost. And it's just funny to me watching the reaction of people, because I don't understand why people think Joe Rogan will actually get kicked off Spotify. Leave aside, Brad, the whole, he's a controversial figure. He talks to controversial people. Leave aside that part even. Spotify just invested $100 million plus in this guy. You think they're going to drop this $100 million whale for Neil Young and Joni, whatever the hell's her name? I don't even know what her name is.
Yeah, I mean, this was my exact reaction. I was talking about this on TV last week, and I said, I'm a Gen Zer, so I was like, Neil Young, who?
Yeah.
And now that I've learned a little bit about him, he is like a rock person.
He's a legend. I'm sure he is.
He hasn't been relevant for a long time. And more importantly, he's not providing anywhere near $100 million in value to Spotify. I mean, just let me put this in context for you guys. The CNN primetime during the week is lucky to get 500,000 people watching.
Yeah.
Fox News will get between 1 to 2 million people if in their stronger broadcast hours. Joe Rogan gets 10 million people flat an episode. So he is 5 to 10 times more relevant than any mainstream media institution or anything. So the revenue that he must be bringing in for Spotify is honestly like mind-blowingly huge. And I said this, I was like, if you're going to Karen and demand to speak to the manager of Spotify and say, choose me or him, don't go after the dude with the $100 million contract. You must have a very inflated sense of self-worth.
That's what it is.
If you ever thought for a second they were going to choose your dusty old man rock music over the biggest podcaster in the world, who's literally got $100 million contract. I mean, that's bigger than the GDP of some like island nations.
Yeah, it's really funny to me because you are right about that sort of inflated sense of self-importance and the sheer amount of money this guy, like, it's like going to HBO in 2017 and asking for Game of Thrones to get pulled off. It's not gonna happen.
Or like going to Netflix and asking them to cancel Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, it's just not gonna happen. Those guys, and even by himself, Joe Rogan's too big now. He's too big to cancel at this point. Unless he does something completely psycho, he's too big to cancel at this point.
I mean, Shem, this would be like if you and I went to Twitter. We both have like, I don't know what, like 50,000 followers or what. So we have like a little bit of Twitter clout, but we were like, we demand that you kick Joe Biden off, or we're going to
pull Elon Musk off.
Right? Like Twitter would be like, who are you and what? No, right? Like, so it's funny to watch these people self-cancel, though actually I've heard that this is we're being scammed a little bit by Neil Young. He's making this like a principled thing about misinformation, but apparently he has long-standing disputes and complaints with Spotify that he's actually kind of backdooring his exit into this to make it seem even more principled, like he's this COVID sensitive guy.
When really plays on Apple Music.
He already now he's getting a prime gig on Apple Music. It's hilarious to me too, because these people who are so outraged over Joe Rogan, they can't be on Spotify anymore. will go to Apple, where like Apple literally uses slave labor in China, and there's all sorts of much more problematic people than Joe Rogan on Apple. And they also go on YouTube, which has way crazier people than anybody. They have Sharma on there.
I know. I'm still somehow on YouTube. Yeah, people haven't gotten rid of me yet, which is crazy. But it's if I were to play before I get into that, because I wanted to play devil's advocate for a second on the Joe Rogan thing. But before I even get to that, it's what's funny to me is why do you think? Let's explore this a little bit, because why do you think there is such an attack on Joe Rogan ever since his podcast has gotten big? Like, people, I can understand that there's something about Joe Rogan that you don't like. Maybe you don't like his dude bro personality. Maybe you don't like the dude bros who listen to him. Whatever. I can get behind that. Whatever. But for so vociferously asking for him to get deplatformed or canceled, what do you think's behind that?
Well, I already mentioned it. It's the fact that he's so much bigger than all these establishment media institutions. Like CNN has run so many segments foaming at the mouth about how he's killing people, right? Well, and it's like not a
Brian
coincidence.
Stelter's segments on Joe Rogan are always so much fun.
I know, but it's not a coincidence that he gets 20 times more viewers than them per episode. And he's just one dude, like from his house or his home studio or whatever. So I think the real reason is that they're threatened by him.
Yeah.
The mainstream media gatekeepers and old institutions are threatened by him, and so they want to destroy him and take out the competition. It's honestly that simple, because if it was really about like misinformation or any of that, there are much better targets to go after than him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had a couple, people who are a little out there on COVID stuff, but he's also had tons of normie people, right? He's had CNN Dr. Sanjay Gupta. I want him to have Dr. Fauci on, just so you can finally
that will
see
be fun, actually.
somebody go at it with Fauci, but I don't think
Yeah.
Fauci would. Fauci's probably the one who wouldn't. I bet Rogan already has invited him. I don't know, but I bet. Anyway, though, the point is they're threatened by him and they want to take him out, and that's why there's this fixation of him.
Yeah, it's funny because when he was talking to like Bob Lazar about Area 51 and UFOs, people were like, that's who this guy has always been. He's never hid who he is.
The UFOs are real, though.
You listen to that podcast and it makes you think. So that's all.
I interviewed on my podcast a military reporter about UFOs, and I started super skeptical, and he convinced me that UFOs are objectively definitely real. The question is, are they alien? We're not sure, but it's hard to understand what else they could be.
Right.
Well, I think I know. I think they're just under development US military aircraft, which have been kept secret from the public.
But that was the deal, though, because the technology on some of them is so much far advanced of anything we have right now. The speed and movement and adjustment, and some of them have been able to turn off nuclear development devices. Like they go to power plants and then they flick them on and off.
Is that true?
Yeah. So it's pretty crazy stuff, and UFOs are real, according to this military reporter who I know personally. I can't say that much about it. I don't truly know. Like, this isn't my expertise, but I was convinced that this is a legit thing.
Yeah, that's crazy. But if I were to play devil's advocate, and this is an argument that I've heard on social media a couple of times, and I want to hear what you think about it. People say, all right, Joe Rogan's huge now, and he's basically, he's basically a version of mainstream media. If he's not institutional media, he's still pretty mainstream. It's hard to get more mainstream than Joe Rogan at this point in time. So when he's as mainstream as, let's say, institutional media, should he be not held to the same standards and the same level of scrutiny as mainstream media?
I think he's held to probably a harsher standard. Think of all the things CNN pushed over the last few years, or Fox even, right? That turned out to be nothing burgers. The problem, and Joe put this out in his response video, the problem with banning misinformation is that yesterday's misinformation is today's consensus, right? Like, it was once considered misinformation to suggest that the galaxy does not revolve around the Earth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they literally put the whole heliocentricity thing was a radical misinformation concept at the time. And I know that's like an ancient example. But even now, and I won't mention what the things are because I don't want to flag the COVID censors, right? But a bunch of things that we were told at the beginning of the pandemic were misinformation or conspiracy theories are now like legitimate possibilities or accepted as fact. So if you had just shut down, even Facebook did this. Facebook had a policy of deleting any post that suggested COVID-19 may have come from a lab. Then, you know, we find out that even now people like Dr. Fauci acknowledge that's a legitimate possibility. We don't know, but it's a possibility. And now they had to reverse their policy. And it's like, people, this is why you can't ban misinformation, quote unquote, because who gets to decide? The experts don't agree on things. Science is not about agreement. It's about debate and research and trying to prove each other's hypotheses wrong. And so the idea that we could just shut down misinformation because the experts say it's harmful and wrong, well, the experts are constantly evolving their understanding. They don't agree. What we need,
and who's an expert too? You know, how do you decide who's an expert and whose opinion matters more than somebody else's?
We all just have to bow to Fauci.
Disagreeing with Fauci, with Fauci is disagreeing with science.
Yeah, exactly. Now, do you remember all those? I remember around Christmas time, I saw the most cringe stuff with Fauci and the vaccines, where people had like those little Fauci things that they were hanging from their Christmas trees.
Fauci has become a kink, like a fetish for many American liberals. He is now like a sex symbol. He's now like an unquestionable god. I'm on TikTok. Right. And I produce a lot of content, have a pretty big following on TikTok. And when it comes to Fauci, there is so much like hero worship and then Gen Z sexualization of
that.
Dr.
Is such
Fauci.
a weird thing, though. That's the same thing happened with Andrew Cuomo. Remember before he got canceled? It was the same thing. Andrew Cuomo was like the hottest thing in the world. Why?
I don't know.
What is this?
These people have an authority kink for somebody that will lie to them, control them, and tell them what to do.
Yeah. Just want to be dominated or something like that. You know, it's a domination.
Dr. Fauci, dominatrix.
Dominate me, Dr. Fauci, with your 83-year-old arms. Yeah.
He's so old.
He's so old, exactly. What is he doing in that
actually
position?
In his 80s. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You belong in like a home eating pudding.
I mean, you know, you could say the same thing about Joe
Trump.
Biden as well.
They're ancient.
And Trump, dude.
I've said this for a while. We can have a minimum age, right? You have to be a certain age to be in Congress, to be president. Why can't we have a maximum? I think it should be 66.